in the dense jungles of the Philippines. Decades after the war had supposedly ended, locals began reporting strange attacks. Crops were being stolen, livestock slaughtered, and shadowy figures seen slipping into the trees at night. At first, people thought it was bandits, but the truth? It was far darker and far stranger, because what they discovered hiding in that jungle would leave the entire world in shock. Alright, so picture this. It's 1974, and you're a Filipino farmer just trying to make an honest living. You wake up one morning and half your rice crop is gone, your water buffalo has been shot, and the police? They have no idea who's doing this. Now you know what most people would think. Bandits, right? Wrong. What was hiding in that jungle was something nobody could have imagined. The man we're about to talk about isn't just another forgotten war story. This is about Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda, a Japanese soldier who fought World War II for 29 years after it ended. No kidding. While you were going to school, getting married, having kids, this guy was out there in the jungle, convinced the war was still going on. Okay, let's go back to 1944. World War II is raging and Japan is getting desperate. The Americans are island hopping their way toward Japan, and the writing's on the wall. That's when they send this 22-year-old intelligence officer named Hiroo Onoda to a tiny island called Lubang in the Philippines. Now, Hiroo wasn't your average soldier. This guy had been trained in guerrilla warfare at the Nakano Military School, basically Japan's version of Special Forces training. They taught him sabotage, intelligence gathering, and most importantly, how to survive behind enemy lines. The Japanese military wasn't messing around when they picked this guy. His commanding officer, Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, pulls him aside and gives him orders that would haunt him for the next 3 decades. I'm paraphrasing here, but it was something like, you are to carry out guerrilla warfare on Lubang Island. Under no circumstances are you to die by your own hand. It may take 3 years, it may take 5, but whatever happens, we will come back for you. Do not surrender. Here's the thing. Those weren't just orders. In Japanese military culture, especially back then, orders from your superior were sacred. They were worth dying for. And for Hiroo, they became worth living for, no matter how long it took. So August 15th, 1945 rolls around. Emperor Hirohito announces Japan's surrender on the radio. The atomic bombs had been dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The war was over. Soldiers everywhere were laying down their weapons and going home. But here's where it gets crazy. Hiroo and his 3 remaining men are hiding out in the jungle of Lubang Island, and they start finding these leaflets. Thousands of them, dropped from American planes, saying the war is over, Japan has surrendered. Come out, and you'll be treated fairly. Now, you and I would probably think, okay, time to go home. But remember, Hiroo had been trained in psychological warfare. He knew about propaganda and these leaflets. They looked too perfect, too clean. His training told him this was exactly the kind of trick the enemy would pull. So what does he do? He burns the leaflets. He tells his men they're fake. They keep fighting a war that, unknown to them, had already ended. The Philippines gained independence in 1946. Harry Truman became president. The Cold War started. And somewhere in the jungle, 4 Japanese soldiers are still fighting World War II. Here's where the story gets really heartbreaking. Over the years, Hiroo's companions start to crack. 1949, one of them, Private Uchiha Katsu, decides he's had enough. He leaves a note saying he's going to surrender and just walks away into the jungle. The other 3 never see him again. Now it's just Hiroo and 2 other guys, Corporal Shuichi Shimada and Private First Class Kinshichi Kozuka. They're surviving on stolen rice, coconuts, bananas, whatever they can find. They've built these elaborate hideouts in the jungle, complete with weapons, caches, and escape routes. But the locals on Lubang? They're getting fed up. These aren't ghost stories anymore. People are getting shot at. Crops are disappearing. Cattle are being killed. The Philippine government starts sending search parties, but these guys are like ghosts. They know every inch of that jungle. In 1952, Japan actually sends Hiroo's family members and former comrades to the island with loudspeakers, begging him to come out. They play recordings of his family calling his name. Can you imagine? Your own mother's voice echoing through the trees, pleading for you to come home, and you're convinced it's just enemy propaganda. October 19th, 1972, that's when everything changes for Hiroo. He and Kozuka are raiding a village for supplies when they run into Philippine police. In the firefight that follows, Kozuka gets shot and killed. After 28 years of fighting together, Hiroo is completely alone. This is where the story gets almost unbelievable. Picture this. You're 50 years old. You've spent more than half your life in a jungle, and your last companion just died in your arms. Most people would break, but not Hiroo. His sense of duty was so strong that he just kept going. For the next year and a half, he's a one-man army. The locals start calling him the Phantom Soldier. He's stealing food, setting traps, avoiding capture. He's become this legendary figure. Some people think he's a spirit. Others think he's just a crazy old man who won't give up. But here's what really gets me. Hiroo kept a diary through all of this. And in it, he writes about missing home, wondering about his family, but never once questioning his orders. Even alone, even after decades, his loyalty never wavered. Enter Norio Suzuki. This guy was something else. A 24-year-old Japanese college dropout, who basically decided he was going to travel the world looking for three things: a panda, the abominable snowman, and Lieutenant Onoda. Now, most people would think that's a joke, right? But Suzuki was dead serious. In February 1974, he actually goes to Lubang Island with nothing but a backpack and some basic camping gear. No weapons, no military training, just pure determination. And believe it or not, after just 4 days of searching, he actually runs into Hiroo. Picture the scene. Suzuki is sitting by his campfire at night when this weathered, sunburned figure emerges from the jungle, rifle in hand. After 29 years of hiding from everyone, Hiroo approaches this young Japanese guy who's clearly not military. They talk for hours. Suzuki explains that the war ended in 1945, that Japan is now a peaceful, prosperous country. He shows Hiroo newspapers, tells him about the economic miracle, the Olympics in Tokyo in 1964. But Hiroo just shakes his head. "I will not surrender," he says, "unless I receive orders from my commanding officer." So now Suzuki has this impossible task. Find a Japanese military officer from World War II, who's probably in his 70s or 80s, if he's even still alive. Remember, this is 1974. The war ended 29 years ago. Most of these guys are either dead or want to forget the whole thing ever happened. But somehow, and I mean somehow, Suzuki tracks down Major Yoshimi Taniguchi. The man who gave Hiroo those fateful orders back in 1944 is now 74 years old and running a small bookstore in Japan. Can you imagine getting that phone call? "Hi, you don't know me, but I found one of your soldiers in the Philippines and he's still fighting the war." Taniguchi is stunned. He thought Hiroo had died decades ago. But when Suzuki explains the situation, the old major doesn't hesitate. Despite his age, despite the difficulty of travel, he agrees to go to the Philippines to personally relieve Hiroo of duty. March 9th, 1974. That's the date that changed everything. Taniguchi, now a frail old man, stands in a clearing in the Lubang jungle, wearing his old military uniform. And there, after 29 years, 4 months, and 18 days, Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda finally receives new orders. The war is over. You are relieved of duty. The moment Hiroo surrenders is something else. He hands over his sword, his rifle, a .25 caliber Arisaka that still worked perfectly after 3 decades in the jungle, and 500 rounds of ammunition. He'd kept his equipment in perfect condition all those years. When they bring him back to civilization, the culture shock is unimaginable. He left Japan as a militaristic empire and returned to find a peaceful, democratic nation. Tokyo had been rebuilt. Bullet trains were running. People were wearing jeans and listening to rock music. It was like time travel. The Philippine government, believe it or not, officially pardoned him for the killings that had occurred over the years. President Ferdinand Marcos understood that Hiroo genuinely believed he was still at war, but the guilt ate at him. He'd killed at least 30 people during his time in the jungle. Farmers, police officers, people who were just trying to live their lives. Hiroo lived until 2014, reaching the age of 91. For the rest of his life, he struggled with what he'd done and whether it had all been worth it. When reporters asked if he regretted those 30 years, he gave an answer that still gives me chills. "I do unconsider those years a waste of time. Without the war, my life would have been completely different. That's the thing about duty, about loyalty taken to the extreme. Hiroo Onoda was unto a hero or a villain. He was a man who followed his orders to the very end, even when those orders led him down a path that cost him everything. His story makes you wonder, what would you do if you were absolutely certain you were right, even when the whole world was telling you that you were wrong? If this story got you thinking about the power of belief and duty, let me know in the comments below. What do you think? Was Hiroo a dedicated soldier or a tragic victim of war? And if you want more incredible true stories like this one, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Trust me, history is full of stories that are stranger than fiction, and we're just getting started.